My parents said it straight to my face. Your brother chases bigger dreams, you'll see, once he figures it out, while he'd been living in their house for years. So I replied, then his dreams should be paying the bills, not you. I, 32 male, have been working my butt off as a landscaper since I was 19. Started at the bottom just mowing lawns in the heat, and now I have my own crews for that. Good money, tons of responsibility, and actual career growth. Not that my parents ever saw it that way. My parents have always treated my younger brother, 30 male Dylan, like he was God's gift to humanity. He's 2 years younger than me and literally has never held down a job for more than 6 months. But somehow in their eyes, he was always exploring his options while I was settling for a blue-collar career. Dad's this old-school construction foreman, been with the same company for 30-plus years. Mom works hospital billing. They're solidly middle class, but act like they're royalty when it comes to Dylan. The entitlement was off the charts. Now this crap started way earlier than I realized. Take this for example. When I was 14, I saved up for months working at the local grocery store, bagging groceries to buy this sick mountain bike. Dad saw it and immediately went, "Hope you're not planning to get it muddy. You paid good money for that." The very next weekend, Dylan took it without asking, crashed it into a ditch, bent the frame, and scratched it all up. When I lost my mind, Dad said, "It's just a bike, Mike. Don't be so materialistic. Your brother could have been hurt. The shitty part." Dylan got his first bike as a surprise gift for improving his attitude after he'd been suspended from school for fighting. Make that make sense? Senior year, I actually got accepted to state with a partial scholarship. Was pretty stoked about it until I saw the remaining costs. Asked my parents if they could help with housing since they always talked about investing in education. Dad literally laughed and said, "You've got 2 hands and a strong back. Figure it out." So I did. Worked landscaping all summer. Saved up, but ultimately decided on community college while working full-time. Practical decision that made financial sense. But my parents acted like I'd announced I was joining a cult. "Community college isn't a real college," Mom said, sighing like I'd just crushed her dreams. "I guess not everyone has university potential." Meanwhile, Dylan graduated high school by the skin of his teeth. His grand plan taking a gap year, which was code for playing video games in the basement and working maybe 15 hours a week at the mall. My parents treated this like he was on some grand journey of self-discovery. Dylan's really figuring out his path. Dad would tell relatives with this proud smile, he's not rushing into anything. When I'd come home from pulling 12-hour days between school and work, Dylan would be sprawled on the couch surrounded by snack wrappers playing the PlayStation I'd bought. Sometimes with a girl I'd never seen before, sometimes with dudes who looked shifty as hell. Parents said nothing. It or the time I asked for help with community college tuition. $800 for a semester of landscaping design classes. Dad told me to figure it out because that's what men do. Meanwhile, they paid for Dylan's entire first year at state, which he flunked out of after partying nonstop. Their response: college isn't for everyone. He's just too creative for structured learning. My buddy Alex, who I've known since high school, kept telling me how messed up it was. "Dude, your parents act like they owe Dylan everything and you owe them," he'd say. I'd brush it off with, "That's just how family is." But deep down, I knew he was right. Things got even worse when I was 25, and Dylan borrowed my credit card to buy concert tickets for himself and his friends, $760 worth. When I confronted him at a family dinner, my parents acted like I was being unreasonable for wanting to be paid back. He wanted to treat his friends to a nice experience, Mom said. Like that justified literal theft. "You make good money now." "What's the big deal?" Dad added. "It's not like you have a family to support." Dylan just smirked the whole time. "I'll pay you back when I get my tax return," he said. He never did. What they didn't know was that I was saving for a certification program that would bump me up to supervisor level at work. That $760 meant delaying my career advancement by almost 6 months. When I finally did get certified paying out of pocket by picking up extra weekend shifts, my parents didn't even acknowledge it. Dylan, however, got a "congratulations on your new beginning" card with $200 inside when he got hired at a bar. He quit 3 weeks later. When I got my first promotion to crew leader at 24, my parents didn't even show up to the small celebration I had at a local pizza place. "It's just landscaping," Dad said. "Call us when you get a real career." But when Dylan got made head bartender at some dive bar, which basically meant he was the only one who could make a martini, they took him out to a fancy dinner and posted all over Facebook about how proud they were. You're even on social media. The difference was stark. Mom would share every single one of Dylan's Instagram posts, no matter how ridiculous. My handsome boy enjoying his weekend under a picture of him flexing in a club bathroom. Meanwhile, when I posted photos of a major landscaping project I designed and managed for a local business park, complete with water features and custom stonework crickets. Not a like, not a share, nothing. For my 30th birthday, Mom sent me a $25 gift card to Applebee's. For Dylan's 28th, they surprised him with a weekend trip to Vegas and gave him $500 spending money. When I pointed out the disparity, Mom said Dylan needed a break after his breakup. He'd been dating the girl for 2 months. Speaking of girlfriends, they sabotaged every relationship I ever had. When I brought home my college girlfriend, Caddy, Mom spent the entire dinner talking about how some women just aren't nurturing enough to make good wives. When I dated Rachel, who was a dental hygienist, Dad kept making comments about how she probably just wants a provider and asked her if she was the gold-digging type right to her face. When I started dating my girlfriend, Cammie, who's this smoking hot environmental science teacher who actually respected my work, Dylan couldn't handle it. First time I brought her to a family dinner, he spent the whole night trying to flirt with her, telling her I was still hung up on my ex, a complete lie, and that she could do better than a dirt guy. My parents, they laughed it off. Dylan's always been such a charmer with the ladies, Mom said proudly, while Dad nodded like his son hitting on his brother's girlfriend was some kind of achievement. Cammie was furious in the car ride home. Your brother is a total creep and your parents just enable it, she said. I couldn't even argue with her. The pattern continued for years. Dylan would screw up, my parents would bail him out, I would succeed. They'd minimize it or ignore it completely. It was like living in some bizarre parallel universe where the rules were completely different depending on which son you were. The real breaking point with Dylan came when I finally saved enough for my first newish vehicle, a Toyota Tacoma, that I'd worked overtime for months to afford. Nothing super fancy, but it was only 3 years old with low mileage, and I was so damn proud of that truck. First time in my life I bought something nice without asking for help. I was at my parents' for one of those obligatory Sunday dinners. Still trying to keep the peace back then. And Dylan showed up already half in the bag. I noticed him eyeing my truck and making comments about how it was compensating for something. After dinner, I stepped out for a smoke and my truck was gone. My keys weren't by the door anymore. 2 hours of calling and texting Dylan with no response. I'm about ready to report it stolen when this jerk pulls up with music blasting, empty energy drink cans rolling around inside a huge scratch down the side and a dented bumper. You borrowed your ride to pick up Stacy, he slurred, throwing my keys at me. She wanted to see if the back seat was as roomy as it looks. Then he just laughed and staggered inside like it was nothing. Here's what they didn't see. I just spent the previous weekend detailing that truck myself. Washed it, waxed it, detailed the interior, even got on my hands and knees to scrub the floor mats. Not because I'm obsessive, but because it represented everything I'd worked for. And now it had a 3-foot scratch down the driver's side and smelled like cheap perfume. I followed him in, absolutely fuming, and confronted him in front of my parents. Their reaction. Dad goes, "Don't be so dramatic, Mike. It's just a scratch. Family shares things." Mom chimes in with, "I'm sure Dylan will help pay for the repairs, won't you, Dylan?" Dylan just flopped on the couch, changed the channel and said, "It's already got scratches. Probably trying to scam me to pay for your crappy driving. Besides, what's the big deal? It's just a truck. Not like you've got anything better to spend money on. I lost it. He took my truck without permission. That's theft. He damaged it while driving impaired. That's a crime. And you're both sitting here defending him." Dad stood up, getting in my face. "Don't you dare use that tone in my house. Dylan made a mistake. You need to calm down. A mistake. He stole my truck. He damaged my property. And you're acting like I'm the problem." Mom started crying. Her go-to move whenever she was losing an argument. "Why are you always so hard on your brother? He's going through a tough time right now. He's always going through a tough time," I shot back. "And I'm always expected to just deal with it." Dylan still sprawled on the couch, just smirked. "Not my fault you're so uptight, bro. It's just a truck. Chill." That was it. I was done. I turned to Dylan and said, "You have 30 days to pay for the damages or I'm filing a police report for theft and property damage." Dad exploded. "You will not file a police report against your brother. That is not how this family handles things." "Then how does this family handle things, Dad? Because from where I'm standing, Dylan gets away with literal crimes while I get lectured for being upset about it." I walked out, and that night I blocked Dylan's number, told my parents I was done with him until he paid for the damages and apologized. Their response: "You've always been too sensitive. Dylan's going through a rough patch right now." Mom and Dad spent the next few months trying to make me apologize to him. Dad would call with BS like, "Your mother's upset about this family rift you've created." Mom would text me pictures of Dylan at family events with captions like, "Someone's missing," or "If only everyone was here." Not once did they actually hold him accountable. Not once did they acknowledge that he was in the wrong. It was always about how I needed to be the bigger person and let it go for the sake of family harmony. The promotion that changed everything came about 6 months after the truck incident. I'd been busting my butt taking on extra projects, coming in early, staying late. My boss Kyle noticed and bumped me up to head manager for all North County projects. Company truck, full benefits, salary bump, the works. First time in my life, I felt like my hard work was actually being recognized. I decided to celebrate at this brew pub downtown. Reserved the back patio, ordered food, even hired this local musician to play. I invited my parents, but made it crystal clear Dylan wasn't welcome. Mom tried guilting me. "He's still your brother and family should stick together." Dad was more direct. "You need to grow up and get over this childish grudge. It's embarrassing for everyone." When I stood firm, Dad hit me with, "Fine, but don't expect us to choose sides in this little tantrum of yours." The night of the party, everyone else showed up. My work buddies, friends from softball, even Dylan's wife Casey came without him, which was shocking. Cammy was there too, looking amazing and genuinely proud of me. Dad showed up an hour late, already looking disheveled, wearing this stained Steelers jersey like he couldn't be bothered to change for his son's achievement. Mom at least tried to look happy, but kept checking her phone the whole time. Throughout the night, Dad kept making these loud comments. "Shame not everyone could be here to celebrate." And some people think landscaping management is a big deal. I guess every time Kyle or one of my coworkers would congratulate me, Dad would jump in with something about how Dylan could have been a landscape architect if he wanted. He just has bigger ambitions. At one point, Kyle was showing everyone before and after photos of that tech CEO's project on his tablet. You could literally see my design skills and the transformation of this barren hillside into this gorgeous terrace garden with native plants and a small waterfall. Dad glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds before saying, "Looks like a bunch of plants to me. Not exactly rocket science." My coworker Damon, who had no idea about my family dynamic, pulled me aside and asked, "Dude, what's up with your dad? Why is he being such a jerk at your party?" I just shrugged and said, "That's just him. Don't worry about it." But inside, I was fuming. Then Kyle made this really nice toast about how I'd earned the promotion through consistent hard work, reliability, and exceptional client management skills. Mentioned how clients specifically requested me for their projects and how the company was lucky to have me. That's when Dad stood up, interrupting Kyle mid-sentence, and announced to the whole patio, "Must be nice getting promotions for just showing up and pushing a lawnmower. Not like you're out there building actual structures like real men. Your brother would have run circles around this landscaping stuff if he wanted to, but he's always aimed higher. Shame you couldn't even invite your own blood to your little party. Some son you turned out to be." The whole place went dead silent. Kyle's jaw literally dropped. Cammy squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Ing and I just snapped. Not by yelling, but by finally being completely done. I raised my glass, smiled real calm, and said, "Awesome. Then Dylan can start paying your mortgage too. I'm sure all those bartending shifts will cover it when he's not busy stealing cars. Or maybe he can sell some of those actual structures you think are so impressive." Dad's face went purple. "How dare you talk to me like that after everything we've done for you?" I laughed right in his face. "Everything you've done for me. Name one thing, Dad. One actual thing you've done for me that you didn't make me pay back with interest." Mom tried to jump in with Mike. "Please, not here. We're your parents." "No." I cut her off. "You're Dylan's parents. I'm just the ATM you use when he burns through his allowance." I set down my glass, thanked everyone else for coming, and walked out. Cammy followed me, but I told her I needed some space. Got in my truck and drove to this overlook outside town. Sat there for hours thinking about all the BS I'd put up with. What made it worse was realizing that I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done, completely empty, like someone had flipped a switch inside me and all my feelings about my family had just disappeared. That night, I decided I was done being the family punching bag. I called my buddy Alex, who works at the bank where my parents have their accounts. Not exactly legal, but he owed me big time after I covered for him when he got into some serious trouble. "Hey, need you to check something for me," I told him. "Want to know exactly how much my parents are helping Dylan financially." What Alex found next day was way worse than I expected. My parents weren't just helping Dylan, they were financially ruined by him. Next day, Alex texts me, "Dude, it's way worse than you think. They've been paying his entire rent $1,850 per month. His car payment $430 per month. His credit card minimum's about $600 per month. And they're co-signers on a personal loan he took out 3 months ago for $25,000. They're also paying the minimums on that too. Their accounts are getting drained every month. That was all I needed to hear. I had access to my parents' email from when I set up their computer years ago. Logged in and found they'd been struggling with their own finances. Dad's company was downsizing and he was worried about getting laid off. They were actually behind on their own mortgage. I also found emails from their credit card companies showing they'd maxed out 3 cards paying for Dylan's emergencies. One was a $3,000 charge at some fancy hotel where he'd apparently thrown a birthday party for himself. Another was $1,800 at an electronics store for a gaming setup. All while they were skipping their own mortgage payments. So I made my move the ultimate clean break. I spent the next week ghosting their calls while I set everything up. Found a new apartment an hour away in a complex with good security. Gave notice at my old place. Told Kyle about my family situation so he'd understand why I needed to keep my new address private. But before I disappeared, I made a few strategic moves. I forwarded those credit card emails to both my parents with a simple message. Hope the golden child was worth it. Then I sent an anonymous tip to Dad's company about how he'd been taking materials from job sites for personal projects. Something he'd bragged about for years, not made up actual stuff he'd admit to at family dinners. Showing off how he beat the system. Not enough to get him fired, just enough to make sure he'd be on the first list when layoffs came. Was it petty? Maybe. But after 30+ years of watching him break rules while holding me to impossible standards, it felt like karma. Then I changed my number, deleted all social media, got a P.O. box for mail, and vanished from their lives completely. The first month of radio silence was weird. I kept expecting to feel guilty to cave and call them, but that feeling never came. Instead, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't bracing for the next family drama, the next comparison to Dylan, the next request for help that would be taken for granted. And I threw myself into work. Kyle was impressed with my renewed focus, and within 3 months I was exceeding all my targets. The company gave me a bonus that I actually got to keep instead of lending to Dylan or helping my parents with some emergency. My new apartment was smaller but in a better area. I furnished it exactly how I wanted. No secondhand stuff, no hand-me-downs. Everything I picked out myself. It felt like a fresh start. The first thing I bought was the sick leather couch I'd had my eye on for years, but could never justify spending money on when Dylan always needed loans. I set up a home office with a proper desk instead of the folding table I'd been using. Hung art on the walls that I actually liked, instead of the garage sale crap Mom had always given me to make the place look nice. Cammy and I took a break for a bit. She supported my decision, but needed some time to process the fact that I'd cut off my entire family. Fair enough. We stayed in touch, though, getting coffee every couple weeks and texting regularly. I made new friends through work and joined an adult soccer league, started hiking on weekends. Actually developed hobbies that weren't just escapes from family stress. I also started a side business designing small-scale landscapes for homeowners who couldn't afford full professional services. Created template plans they could implement themselves with plant lists and maintenance schedules. Made an extra $1,500 to $2,000 a month doing what I loved with zero family drama attached to it. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first. And it felt incredible. 8 months later, Cammy, who I was still in touch with, told me Dad had indeed been laid off during the company's restructuring. Mom's hours at the hospital had been cut back. And Dylan's still doing the same old stuff, still the golden child who could do no wrong except now they couldn't afford to keep bankrolling his lifestyle. I mean, Cammy had run into Casey at the gym who spilled all the tea. Apparently, Dylan had been fired from 3 more jobs in the span of 6 months. The last one was at a warehouse where he'd been caught stealing inventory and selling it online. Instead of pressing charges, the manager had just fired him, not wanting the paperwork hassle. Dylan had also totaled the Honda my parents bought him and was now driving Mom's car, leaving her to take the bus to work. Dad had been forced to sell his prized fishing boat to cover some of Dylan's debts, but was telling everyone it was just time for an upgrade. The most satisfying part, Dylan had been forced to move back in with them because he couldn't afford rent anywhere. 3 adults crammed into their 2-bedroom house with Dylan taking over the living room. Casey said the place looked like a frat house with Dylan's crap everywhere and my dad sitting in the kitchen looking shell-shocked at what his life had become. Then the texts started coming from unknown numbers, extended family members trying to reach me. Your parents are struggling, they'd say. They might lose the house. My Aunt Linda even left a voicemail saying, "I know they weren't always fair to you, Mike, but they're still your parents." I said nothing, did nothing, just kept living my life, running my cruise, making good money, and actually enjoying the peace. My cousin Tim, who I'd always been kind of close with, reached out through email. Smart guy, found my work contact. "Hey man, I get why you went dark. I've seen how they treated you versus Dylan, but things are bad now. They're drowning in debt from years of bailing Dylan out. Just thought you should know." I didn't even reply to Tim, not out of anger toward him, but because I knew any response would open a door I wasn't ready to open. Around the 1-year mark of my disappearance, I got an unexpected visitor at work. Casey, Dylan's wife, or ex-wife as I'd find out. She looked tired, bags under her eyes, but put together. I was in the area for a job interview, she said. Thought I'd stop by. We got coffee and she filled me in on the family situation without me having to ask. She and Dylan had split up 6 months ago after she found out he'd been cheating on her with multiple women. She moved out, got her own place, was starting over. "Your parents are in bad shape," she said, stirring her coffee. "The bank foreclosed on their house. They're living in this tiny apartment now. Your dad's been blacklisted in construction after that tip about the materials. Your mom's hours got cut to part-time. They're broke." "And Dylan?" I asked, surprised at how little emotion I felt. "Dylan is Dylan," she said with a dry laugh. "Still partying, still charming his way through life, living on their couch, still their perfect son, even as they lose everything helping him. Casey told me Dylan had been offered a management position at his friend's landscaping company, a much smaller operation than where I worked, but had turned it down because that's Mike's thing, and I'm better than that. Instead, he was working on a startup idea that seemed to involve a lot of playing video games and very little actual work. She didn't ask me to reach out to them, didn't try to guilt me, just shared the information and let me decide what to do with it. "I don't blame you for leaving," she said as we parted. "I wish I'd done it sooner myself." A year and 3 months after I disappeared, there's a knock at my door on a Sunday morning. I check the security camera installed specifically for this reason and see Dylan looking like absolute garbage, unshaven, bags under his eyes, cheap clothes hanging off him like he'd lost weight. I seriously considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "How'd you find me?" I asked through the barely open door, not inviting him in. "Cammy told Mom where you work now. Took me 3 weeks of watching the parking lot to follow you home," he admitted, which was both pathetic and creepy. "Can I come in?" I stood in the doorway blocking the entrance. "Why would I let you in after you literally stalked me? Mom and Dad lost the house," he blurted out. "Bank foreclosed last month. They're living in this crappy 1-bedroom apartment now. Dad can't find work because of that tip someone sent his company about the materials. Mom's hours got cut even more. They've been helping me out for years, but now they can't anymore." And I said, feeling absolutely nothing. "And I'm screwed, man. I've got like $40,000 in debt. My car got repossessed. Casey left me. I've been sleeping on their couch, but there's barely room for them, let alone me." Yet, as he talked, I noticed things I hadn't seen at first. His hands were shaking slightly. His eyes couldn't focus on one spot, and he had that weird, nervous energy of someone who hasn't slept properly in days. Classic signs of substance abuse I'd seen plenty of times before. "Still waiting for the part where this is my problem," I said. Dylan's face got red. "Look, I know I messed up, okay? I was jealous. You always had your stuff together and I didn't. But they're going to be homeless soon if they keep trying to help me. They're your parents, man." The confession of jealousy caught me off guard, but it wasn't enough. Not after everything. I stepped outside, closing and locking the door behind me, and got right in his face. "No, they're your parents. They made that crystal clear for 32 freaking years. I'm just the gardener. Remember the ATM? I'm the responsible one who was never good enough. They talk about you all the time now," Dylan said, his voice cracking. "Dad says he was wrong. Mom cries about how she should have stood up for you more. Amazing how they only realized that when the gravy train stopped running," I replied. "Tell them I said congratulations on the self-awareness. Better late than never. So you won't help after all those years they supported you?" Dylan's voice had that familiar, entitled edge coming back. I actually laughed. "Supported me when they made me pay back every cent I ever borrowed with interest. When they showed up at my promotion party just to trash my career. When they defended you stealing and damaging my truck." Dylan looked down. "They need $15,000 to avoid eviction from the new place and get caught up on bills. I thought with your promotion and everything." I noticed a fresh tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve. Looked expensive. His shoes were cheaper than usual, but his watch was the same $400 model he'd always worn. Typical Dylan. Still finding money for the things he wanted while begging for the things he needed. "Get off my property before I call the cops," I said calmly, "and don't come back ever." As he walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat. Part of me wondered if I should feel something, pity, satisfaction, anything. But there was just this peaceful emptiness, like finally setting down a heavy weight I'd been carrying my entire life. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Mom to my work address. Subject line: "We're sorry." The email was long, pages of explaining how they'd realized too late how unfairly they'd treated me, how watching Dylan spiral without their financial support had opened their eyes to how they'd enabled him, how Dad had been diagnosed with depression after losing his job, how they were about to be evicted with nowhere to go. The email was peppered with convenient new realizations, how they'd always admired my work ethic but didn't know how to show it, how they'd been blinded by Dylan's charm, how they now understood that their different parenting styles had actually been harmful double standards. There were lines that might have moved me once. "We realize now that we took your strength for granted while coddling Dylan's weakness, and your father can't sleep at night thinking about how he dismissed your career when you've created such a successful life for yourself." At the end, there was a direct ask. "We need $15,000 to keep our apartment and get back on our feet. We know we have no right to ask, but we have nowhere else to turn. Dylan told us about your new place. It sounds like you're doing well. Please, Mike, we're still your parents." And here's the thing. I was doing well. The promotion had nearly doubled my salary. I had a solid emergency fund investment starting to grow. I could have written a check without it hurting me much. But I remembered all those years of being treated like I didn't matter, of watching them bail Dylan out over and over while I struggled on my own. I remember Dad's face at my promotion party, the disgust in his voice when he talked about my career. So I sent them a formal letter through a lawyer. "I am prepared to provide financial assistance under the following non-negotiable conditions. 1. I will pay $15,000 directly to your landlord and creditors, not to you personally. 2. You will both sign a formal loan agreement with 8% interest, the same terms Dad gave me for my truck repair loan, with payments to begin in 6 months. 3. Dylan will check into a 90-day rehabilitation program for his substance issues with proof of completion required. 4. You will both attend 6 sessions of financial counseling with proof of completion required. 5. You will sign a legal agreement stating you will not contact me outside of loan repayment matters for a period of no less than 2 years. These terms are final and not open to negotiation." Mom called my lawyer crying, begging him to get me to just help family without all these cold conditions. Dad left a voicemail on the law office phone saying real men don't treat their parents like business clients. I didn't respond to either, just waited. 3 days before they were set to be evicted, I got an email from my lawyer. They'd signed the contract. Dylan had checked into a 90-day program. The first payments to their landlord and creditors had been made. My life now is unrecognizable from 2 years ago. Cammie and I are engaged. I got another promotion at work, and I'm now overseeing operations for the entire county. We bought a house. Nothing fancy, but it's ours. We have a dog named Rex who loves to ride in my truck, which I still have and take meticulous care of. Sometimes when we're driving to visit Cam's family, who are amazing by the way, her dad actually asks me about work and seems genuinely interested. We pass through my parents' part of town. I see people who look like them from a distance, but I feel nothing. No anger anymore, no resentment, not even satisfaction at how things turned out, just nothing. And after a lifetime of being made to feel like nothing by them, that emptiness feels like the biggest victory of all.